a former Muslim turned Christian, being hosted on Patrick Bet-David's podcast. I'm so excited to look at this clip. We're going to discover a little bit some truths about the dark side of Islamic conversion or conversion out of Islam. I'm Tal the Traveling Clat, your favorite Zionist prince. Let's take a look.
Let's get right into it. Robert, what is your biggest challenge with the religion of Islam? What's your biggest challenge with it?
You mean the biggest difficulty I see in it?
I would say the biggest difficulty, because to me, I see it from a few different places, right? One, there's faith, meaning none of us have gone to heaven to see what heaven's going to look like. We're all taking a risk. All of us here are taking a risk. Either we're all going to be right, either we're all going to be wrong, or either one of us is going to be right, meaning one group's going to be right and the other's going to be wrong. But we don't know. That's faith, that's prayer. Of course, we've had great experiences in life to say, I had a connection with God. I had a moment with ... And then that's individual to us, right? So to me, it's faith, it's religion, it's enemies, it's common enemies, it's the challenges that's going on in the world, specifically with America as being, for the longest time, the greatest country in the world. What is affecting that? And then there's a few other things that we'll talk about into as well. So, but for me, it's more from the standpoint of, when you've said you've read the Quran dozens of times, you've studied it, you've written about it, you've talked about it. Even I think the government used 2 of your books in 2011 that Wire talked about, right? I don't know what the 2 books were. I think one of them was about Prophet Muhammad, and So your background, you've been in this world. What is your biggest challenge and differences with the religion of Islam?
Well, probably the main thing is the sanctification of violence and the idea that God will bless and even calls upon the believers to commit acts of violence under certain circumstances. Like Rashid here is an ex-Muslim, and so under Islamic law, as it's traditionally and classically formulated, he would be put to death.
True.
Muhammad said, anybody who changes his religion, kill him. And it's still the position of all of the schools of Islamic jurisprudence, Sunni and Shia, that the apostate should be put to death. Now, obviously, this is not something that means that every apostate has to always go around watching himself, because you have to have somebody who's willing to do that. But those who do it, they think, well, now I have done something that Allah has commanded, and He will bless me for doing it. And me, myself, because I was standing up for the freedom of speech, 2015, Pamela Geller and I put on in Texas a Muhammad art exhibit and cartoon contest. And it was actually, we featured a lot of classic Shiite Persian art depicting Muhammad, as well as contemporary art that was from a more critical standpoint. And a couple of jihadis came from Phoenix, key members, actually, of the Islamic Community Center of Phoenix. One of them was featured in a recruitment video for them, and they tried to kill us. And so I actually would be also under a death sentence just for drawing Muhammad and for sponsoring people who do, which I did not in order to cause gratuitous insult, but to defend the freedom of speech and freedom of expression, which is the foundation of any genuinely free society.
Daniel, what would you say to that? What's your response to that?
Yeah, so just a few points here. Number one, it's interesting how we want to talk about Islam as a religion, but the religion is 95%, like what Jake mentioned. It's about worshiping God, being devoted to a righteous way of life, loving your neighbors, taking care of your parents. That's what 95% of Islam is about. Yes, there are criminal punishments, which we're going to discuss. There is conquest, there is war theory, there's all of this in Islam. But it's interesting how when a conversation is about Islam, we focus on that 5% instead of the 95% of what Islam is about. We don't see this kind of double standard with like Christians. So if you have someone like Matt Walsh is a traditional Christian. There's slavery in the Bible, there's punishment for blasphemers in the Bible, there's killing of heretics in the church tradition. There's no discussion of that with Matt Walsh, right? Or Ben Shapiro. There is killing of blasphemers in the Hebrew Bible. There is, punishments for apostasy in the Talmud.
But we don't do it today.
There's no discussion of that with Ben Shapiro. You can talk about, other values, and that's what the discussion focuses on. But the Islamophobic narrative is just lasering in on these specific topics, which is fine. We can discuss that, but I just want to note the double standard. So the other framing of this whole discussion that I want to put out here, though, is that I'm wondering, like this standard of, there should be no punishment for blasphemy, for example, let's just put that out there. There should be no punishment for mocking and insulting a religion, attacking people's values. Is that coming from a Christian perspective? Is that coming from is that coming from the church tradition? Is that coming from the Bible? Because when we look at the Bible, we see in Leviticus, we see in Deuteronomy that blasphemers should be put to death. Even if you entice, the Bible says, if you entice like your son or your daughter or your wife entices you to worship other than God, then have no mercy. Put them to death without due process mentioned, without any kind of court or tribunal. The husband or the father should just immediately put them to death without mercy. That's what the Bible says. So when Robert wants to criticize Islam, I'm wondering, is that criticism on the basis of the Bible? Is that on the basis of the church tradition? Or is this a liberal, secular, modernist critique of Islam? So I want to know, am I debating or discussing with two Christians or two atheists or two liberal secularists? Like, that's a clarification that we need.
May I?
Yes.
This is a very important clarification, and there are a couple of distinctions that have to be made. One is all of your examples from Christianity are from Old Testament law, which if you had studied Christianity, you would know there's no sect of Christianity, no school of Christian thought, no tradition within Christianity that holds that Old Testament law applies to Christians for all time. As a matter of fact, it never did apply. Even in Judaism, after the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, the rabbis redefined Judaism so that even they don't teach that those punishments have ongoing validity. So you're talking about something that nobody in mainstream Judaism or Christianity thinks is valid today versus something that unfortunately all too many Muslims do think is valid today. And the bringing up of ancient historical wrongdoing is all very well, and there's certainly a place for that. I've got no interest in denying any of the misdeeds of Christians throughout history. But the problem that we have in Islam is that these passages of the Quran that are problematic, passages of Muhammad's traditions that are problematic, they are still considered to be in force by very large numbers of Muslims, such that all the major terrorist groups around the world are Islamic groups. And you don't have any Christian terrorist groups saying Jesus is Lord and blowing people up. There's a reason for that. And the reasons have to do with the interpretative traditions in both religions.
Can I comment?
Yeah, go ahead,
Please.
Yeah, so I would ask Robert a very simple question that I think gets at what the real issue actually is. Do you believe that it's inherently immoral for an apostate to be put to death?
Do I believe that it's inherently immoral
Yes.
for an apostate
Is
to
it
be put to
inherently
death?
immoral?
Well, I know this is some kind of trap, but in any case,
No,
I don't
I'm just
see any
looking for
reason.
honesty on your part. That's all.
You can always have honesty on my part. Everything I tell you is the truth.
Okay, so go
and
ahead.
the fact is that, I don't know. I tell you the truth. I
You
haven't
don't know.
thought about
Wow.
it.
Okay,
But-
you haven't thought about it. Well, you're writing
Yeah.
all of these books on Islam
how are
talking
you
about
criticizing
apostasy,
Islam?
Right.
and you don't even know if this is inherently immoral. That's quite shocking, Robert.
I would say that I don't think that it's moral to put the apostate to death.
So it's
But
immoral.
as it comes to my books about Islam, I'm just reporting on what Islamic clerics and the Islamic tradition teaches about passages like when Muhammad says, if somebody changes his religion, kill him. So
Yeah, but
if you look, for example, in chapter 4, verse 89 of the Quran, in the critical Quran, where it says, if they turn renegade, then come and kill them wherever you find them, then I give Islamic authorities who actually say that this should be done. And that is something people need to know. Now, whether you're talking about in the ideal society, you have apostates put to death, I don't think so, because I believe in the freedom of conscience and the idea that of the dignity of the human person, which is a Christian concept that's not in Islam. You have in Islam, the unbelievers are the most vile of created beings, according to
Well, one
chapter
issue at a
98, verse
time.
6.
One issue at a
Yeah,
time.
So on. No, this is all.
I still
let's
didn't
talk
get an
about
answer
this
if
issue.
it's
I understand, but this
inherently
is all the
immoral?
same issue. Whereas in
Is it
Christianity,
inherently immoral?
all people are equal equal in dignity as made in the image of God. And so in that sense, I would say, no, I don't think it is.
So is it inherently immoral, yes or no?
Can I answer that?
It is.
It is.
So when Deuteronomy, since you like to quote the Quran, when the Bible says this in Deuteronomy 13:6, if your brother, the son of your mother, your son of your daughter, the wife of your bosom, or your friend, who as your own soul secretly entices you, saying, quote, let us go and serve other gods, which you have not known, neither you nor your fathers, of the gods of the people which are all around you, near to you or far from you, from one end of the earth to the other end of the earth, you shall not consent to him or listen to him, nor shall your eye pity him, nor shall you spare him or conceal him, but you shall surely kill him. Your hand shall be first against him to put him to death, and afterward the hand of all the people, and you shall stone him with stones until he dies, because he sought to entice you away from the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. So all Israel shall hear and fear, and not again do such wickedness as this among you. So let me finish. Let me
I
comment
get your
on the
point.
passage. So when your loving God, Jesus Christ, who you believe is God, who revealed the Old Testament and revealed this as a law for the people, and you said that it's inherently immoral for the punishment of apostasy to be death, then you are charging your own God and supposedly loving Jesus with immorality,
Not
sir.
at all.
If you don't see that contradiction and hypocrisy,
It's not
then
in
we
the
can't
least.
really do much for you.
Well, it's not in the least contradictory or hypocritical, because that is God actually ordering something
Was
directly.
God wrong for that?
Now, the question here is whether the Muslims, when they put people to death for apostasy today, are likewise authorized by God in some direct manner. Now,
That's
obviously,
what matters.
yes, the question is...
And it's not inherently immoral. It just matters what is the correct religion and whether or not
Well, see-
God is actually revealing it.
Yeah, if you study the Old Testament, you will actually find that there's a great deal of discussion about passages like that, and whether they are actually commands by God, whether they were understood by the faithful, interpretations by the faithful. The evolving understanding in the Old Testament and the New, and in Jewish and Christian tradition, is something that unfortunately is absent in Islam, such that in Jewish and Christian tradition you have the understanding of the dignity of the human person that ultimately made people realize that putting people to death for apostasy was not something that was acceptable.
Yeah.
But the idea that it was a localized command at some point or understood to be such, that is not the same thing as people nowadays thinking they are the executors of the wrath of Allah because Muhammad says, if anybody changes his religion, kill him, and the Quran says that you can soothe your heart by fighting the
I think that that's probably a good point to end it at. The clip goes on a little bit longer, but it comes down to this point that he's making right now, which is perfect. Muslims today, I would not say all Muslims, but a vast majority of Muslims believe that they need to bring back on the glory days of Islam, while Christianity and Jewish circles have sort of reformed to understand we're not living the way we did back then. We live in a global community where we don't govern ourselves anymore. It's a global world now where, of course, you can have the freedom to religion and practice your religion the way that you want, but you can't steal people's freedom away from them. You cannot kill people in the name of your religion. You cannot enforce your religion onto others the way that was so normal back in the day. And the problem is, in Muslim circles, they really are actively looking to bring that back on even today. And it's a massive issue because we recognize, the Christians and Jews, that we're not living in the temple period anymore. We don't have, whether it's immoral or not, we don't have the religious authority, the way that we operate, to do what needs to be done the way we used to. We're living in a different age today. And Muslims just don't understand that. And you can see this guy is really fighting for this idea of killing somebody for the quote-unquote apostasy. It's, I don't want to say it's morally irreprehensible. I don't know why I'm having a hard time saying that word. Because he's right on paper. The problem is you just can't operate that way today. It doesn't work that way. We don't live in that kind of world. And you got to shape up or get out. That's a reality. I'll see you guys in the next one. I love you long time. Goodbye, clats. Even my content and want to support me, just know your help is needed. There's a bunch of great ways to support me, being PayPal, Buy Me a Coffee, or joining my Patreon community down below. Patreon is the best way to support my channel, and you'll get a bunch of cool perks depending on what tier you join. Another great way to support me is by buying my merchandise on thetravelingclat.com. I regularly drop new merch designs like this beautiful hat, or this amazing shirt, where you can support the channel and get something cool for yourself. I also have an amazing Discord community with people from all over the world. Thank you so much for your support.